Hello, Condors. This is your dream seed for your 2 card reading this cycle, this Aries cycle. Um, it is a absolutely beautiful day today, and I'm sitting here admiring the sunlight in this room. What a gorgeous day! And welcome to spring. So I picked 2 cards, as you know, this one and this one. And as my brief feeling of it, the synopsis was something around fear of change, which makes sense to me. And also there's always nuances and subtleties to things, and they can expand or shrink as we need them to. And I was sitting with which one to pick to talk about the dream seed. And I feel like I want to do this one because I actually have a really good story. It's not so much a dream as it is an experience and maybe a teaching. So it says on the card, transform whole. The story in skin changes your body being now. And I love when, I actually get to doing the work of scrambling the words and changing the arrangement and how that opens meaning, or how it can open meaning or deepen meaning. I don't know, however we want to look at that. Yeah. Just what's popping right now is your body changes your body. And the topic that just keeps coming up for me anyway, the theme that keeps surfacing for me is how our stories shape our reality. And the stories that are told to us, the stories that we tell ourselves, the stories that we tell each other, about who we are in the world, how the world is, how the world works. And because one of our superpowers is, as human beings, from what I have come to understand, is our ability to pick our perspective, and that we can, there's so many perspectives to choose from. It's just an endless array of choice of perspectives. I think we can look at things from so many different angles, and it can mean so many different things at any given time, depending on how we are showing up in the moment, how circumstances are hitting off of us, how our body is feeling, how our relationships are, to the point where music can sound different. It can be the same piece of music and it sounds very different from one year to the next, depending on how we have changed. And we change so much. And, thinking about every 7 years we're a new person, our cells completely change. There's a turnover, and I'm sure I don't have the proper term or whatever. When do I? And so it makes sense to me that as we go along and we change on the inside, outside, our circumstances change, our relationships change, that our perspective changes, and then that, our stories informing our perspective and how that changes. So I've been thinking and feeling a lot into like, so what are the stories that I tell myself that are influencing my perspective? And is it, how is it working for me? Like, am I telling myself stories? Am I engaging in narratives that help me to grow or keep me in the same place? Because I'm afraid of what the change can mean, because it's unknown. And for human beings, and for some human beings more than others, change and the unknown is incredibly scary. Like sitting in this perspective of there's a lot that's going to change for us, like for me personally, in the next few months, and I don't know what it means. I don't know what it's going to look like. And it's up to us, like it's up to us as individuals, my partner and myself. And like, there's nobody to blame if something goes wrong. And potentially nobody to bail us out if something goes wrong. And like extrapolating into like the, I don't know, the catastrophes that could happen. Sure, they could happen, but I'm kind of more sitting in this place of, crisis will happen. I don't need to like go and find it. I don't need to go and create it. I can just deal with it as it comes, as best as I can. So how does this tie into this story of cosmic serpent changes? And this idea that reoccurs around what does it mean to walk in beauty? What does it mean to be walking softly on the earth? To be finding ways around and through things rather than trying to blast a hole through the rock, or, like, can there be ways to live in this world, to engage in my own life and our own lives with less force and more navigation, and navigation in a way that is fueled by what? Fueled by something other than fear. What I have been taught and what I have found to be very true for myself is that I have many, many, many different kinds of fear, and that they can inform my choices. They can be my motivations without me even realizing it. And that I have to check into my body for it to tell me if I am coming from, if my actions are being informed by fear. And if they are, if I catch that, I just stop. Because if what I'm doing is seeded by fear, it's going, like, the crop will then be more fear. So this idea that we don't have to be the stories that we tell ourselves, that we can tell ourselves stories, but it doesn't have to be fixed. Same thing with the stories that have been told to us about who we are, how the world is, how we are in the world. Those can just be stories, but they don't have to be fixed. And even if they're fixed, we can change that. We can shed that addiction or need for things to be fixed, to be definable, to be in a compartment that, even though we don't love it, is understandable. And maybe that's what fear of change is. I don't know, maybe that's just what fear of change is for me. So the story that I have is kind of cute. Maybe kind of cute. For the person who experienced it, maybe not so cute. And if they ever watch this, they might have a giggle because they'll know who they are. So I decided in the summer that I needed to take some time to just be by myself, like to take a week and be by myself, preferably out in the wilderness so I could have some fires so that I could just be with the wind and hear my own thoughts and do my writing and do some, some more work with like watercolors and paint or whatever. And I got really excited, and I found a place that I could go, where it was a place that my friends have created in their house. And my whole time there was really not what I wanted or what I thought I wanted. I was like, this is not what I feel like I need or what I was envisioning. I felt none of the peace that I was longing for internally or externally. I wasn't able to settle into anything. There was lots happening around in the area, lots happening in the space, and it was a real trick to settle in, and it didn't happen. But I did do some ritual work in the area, because they had just kind of moved into that space, like reclaiming it to be a place where people can come, and they were asking, if I could do some work on the space and just kind of like, I don't know, do some stuff. So I did, and I made some water, some sacred water, which I may talk more about in this video or maybe not. I made some water with this card, and my goodness, the first night that the ritual was going, because I think it spread over 3 nights is what it ended up being. So the first night I fell asleep with this water and fire process that I do. And the dreams I had were so strange. I mean, they were beautiful to begin with. Like, it was kind of like a vision kind of a process for a long time. Like, I was not quite asleep and I wasn't awake, but it was like there were daisies, I think, like spread all over the room, and there was a ceiling of daisies, like with their heads like pointing down. So it was just like a ceiling of open daisy heads, and all over the floor. And in the darkness, I could still see them. And then eventually they just kind of faded into bright light, like almost like pollen, like light pollen or something. It was so strange. And like that kind of disturbed me. I was like, what is happening here? Like, I am awake and I'm seeing these things. And then I fell asleep and had some very interesting dreams, and made this water over the course of a few days, and just started to feel things really moving in the space that I was in. And also, considering that it is serpent work, it can be a lot about taking in poison. The medicine cards, animal medicine cards, talk about that with snake, like the process of transmutation, of taking in something, sometimes, poisonous, or just a really big meal, and taking the time to digest and turn it into something else, turn it into something beneficial. And there's so much I could say about like that process of creating an antidote from poison, emotional, spiritual, mental, like anything, you name it. So I didn't really think a whole lot around this ritual once it was done. I did feel that something was accomplished, but then I think, was it a day later or 2 days later, My friend called me or texted me, and she's like, so you know that snake medicine thing that you were working with? So I found a snake in this space, and I had to cancel what I was doing. And when I went to find the snake, and it was quite large, apparently, when I went to find the snake, it exposed a mouse's nest, which exposed rotting floors, which then necessitated all this other work that needed to be done. So it was like a process of like tearing things out, refurbishing, renewing, resetting. And I went, whoops. But also not, because apparently that's what needed to happen. Change. So, is there anything I can say about that? Anything more I can say about that? Oh, the discomfort that precedes when when a snake sheds its skin. I can only imagine, and maybe this is like true for like anything that molts, when it becomes too big for its skin, but it's not quite at the point where it's ready to molt, like how uncomfortable that must be. You know, like it's just, oh, just let me out, but it's not quite time. And then once molting happens, the vulnerability afterwards, you know, the exhaustion of that process, and then the vulnerability. And it's all like, I don't know, I kind of think that everything is uncomfortable in some way or another, and we just get periods of like, ooh, that feels nice. But in lots of ways, I feel like, you know, this is the deal. Like we go along, or like the moon, you know, we start off like kind of quiet and slow, and you know, bit by bit we grow, and you know, take a step back, take some steps forward, take a step back, takes more steps forward, and then we're getting full and big and uncomfortable, and then boom, and then we burst, and then we start to fade a little bit at a time. And I feel like we go through this over and over and over again in relationships, in situations, in ourselves, with the world, like just like in our bodies, with our own health. And maybe that's just how it is, and like how change is cyclical. And so these are the stories that I tell myself when I'm starting to freak out on the cusp of change. And it helps. It's just another skin. And I can make a gift of the skin that I shed. I can make a gift of it to the world, and the world can do with it what it needs to make something beautiful and help somebody else. So there you go. Yay! I hope you've enjoyed this as I've been fumbling my way through this story.